I love Dark Souls, and the only thing I love more than Dark Souls is Dark Souls for Christmas. To celebrate, let's find 12 underappreciated treats from the Soulsborne series for the 12 Days of Soulsmas. These are an assortment of bosses, levels, features, and mechanics that have been overlooked, overhated, or underrated, but reveal FromSoftware's strengths as more than just bosses and bullshit. I love all the great boss fights and the memorable levels, but this list contains what I believe makes FromSoftware great and separates them from the rest of the pack. Without further ado, let's start the list with World Tendency from Demon's Souls. For a brief moment in time, I thought about making the case for item burden, but like a supernova with no ocular observer, that algorithmically explosive thought will vanish, lost to all time, to all things. Not even I, with the assignment before me, can make the case for the worst individual feature in any Souls game. Instead, I select World Tendency as my strange little Demon Souls feature to eulogize. Boletaria is the healthiest Souls world, the one closest to its original state and the easiest one to save. Yet it's the most ghostly, a place where space is out of joint. The asymmetrical multiplayer features of Souls have stuck around because they're cool, but in Demon Souls these features are integral. The apparitions of other demon hunters, the red phantoms, the invaders, the player messages, it's all born from a world falling apart, a world turned from the very foundations of reality by the Old One and its demon hordes. World Tendency is also a part of this. As deaths or heroic victories mount, the world itself shifts with the footholds of the demons in each area. The two strikes against it are that it can be unnecessarily cruel or easily manipulated depending on the experience and knowledge of the player. But, of course, being easily manipulated is a fate befallen most game mechanics. The joy of World Tendency is that it brings out the ethereal nature of Demon Souls. The dream drops of the menu navigation, the line of dead monumentals, the nexus itself, a stasis of fading candles. As the different versions of these places separate from each other, the tendency of each realm ripples out, dots in space fleeing and colliding into each other. Number 2, Blight Town Runout from Dark Souls. In Demon Souls, you compartmentalize the Valley of Defilement entirely out of your brain. Sure, it's the worst poison swamp in the series, but it's likely the final level most players play, and the Mega Man structure lets you run and ride until there's nothing left but the valley. You cannot do that with Blight Town. Blight Town is early game, and there's no skipping it. Hey, expert man, Mr. Dark Souls elevated with that master key, you can skip Lower Undeadburg, you can skip the depths, but you can't skip Blight Town. Sure, go New Londo to Valley of Drakes, and you still have the base of Blight Town, the Poison Lake and Maneater Mildred, and the elevator to Hell and the Blow Dart guys. Blight Town made Dark Souls infamous in 2011. Many people have since sung its praises, but my favorite part is when you finally best Quelaag, ring the bell, and have to walk all the way back up. Sure, it's not all the way back. You go out the side to the Valley of Drakes, but it's a grueling coda, a gut punch line that reminds you, after a moment of triumph, that you're still stuck in the bottom of Lordran. And when you make it all the way back up to the top, you, on a first playthrough, more likely than not, find the Firekeeper dead and Firelink Shrine extinguished, which was supposed to be your first bonfire since the base of Blight Town. FromSoft's indefatigable power is their ability to maintain kayfabe at all times. Blight Town isn't FromSoft being arbitrarily mean. It's a reminder of the deadpan world. You defeated Quelaag, but you're at the bottom of Blight Town. Therefore, you have to climb your way out. You are Buster Keaton on the cowcatcher of the General. Number 3, Tomb of the Giants, Dark Souls. You can skip half of Blight Town, and Lost Izalith is unfinished. The Tomb of the Giants is intentional hatred. Turn the lights off in Shrine of Storm's second level and remove the floor and make the skeletons giant and make the skeletons gank you. I love skeletons. The general revilement that many players have towards Tomb of the Giants is a testament to its power. Unlike the unfinished Izalith or the unrefined gimmickliness of Crystal Cave, Tomb of the Giants is a perfect execution of its concept. A simple concept, but a very fun one. The first two Souls games placed a lot of peripheral demands on the player. Post Sekiro and Elden Ring, the combat in these older games is retroactively less demanding, and was perhaps never that demanding in most moment-to-moment gameplay. Instead, these games excelled at straining players cognitively. The skeletons in Tomb of the Giants are much easier than the small torpedo boys in the catacombs. They are slow, and they die to holy, to blunt damage, and to greatsword R2s. They're good at what skeletons have always been good at, being dead. The jump scare is their greatest skill, and the darkness their ally. Tomb of the Giants is less about getting combat checked, but about developing a plan, loading out the correct items, taking one's time, and observing, using the lanterns or the maggot mask to navigate the darkness. Some of the most reviled levels in Souls are constructed like a game of mousetrap, with us as the ball, banging into and off of all the contraptions until the basket of the "you died" screen falls. Sure, it's a "I don't really want to do this" part, but that's all of Dark Souls 1, and Tomb of the Giants is the highlight of the rocky second half. Number 4, Weapon Durability, Dark Souls 2. Weapon durability is a near meaningless feature in every Souls game. Washing pole and tonitrus aside, most weapons flash when they need repair. You repair them with minimal resources and move on. Elden Ring removed durability, and outside of some collected freaks out there who I respect and envy, I never missed its absence or felt that the game was missing anything. Besides, Dark Souls 2 is the only game where durability matters. Intermittently, to be honest, but intermittent relevancy is something any of us can be jealous of. In Dark Souls 2, weapons degrade really fast, but refresh at bonfires unless they break, in which case they must be repaired. It's almost always a non-issue, except for when the game uses acid pits. Number 5, acid pits. I love acid pits. However, during some longer levels like Frozen Ilium Lois, the Gutter, or fucking, the game pressures the player to either use repair powders, a precious resource you might need later, or to have multiple weapons, preferably of different damage types, equipped and ready to go. Dark Souls 2 pours upgrade stones on the player, so any instance of not having a serviceable weapon is on the player. I'm sorry. It's simply more awesome when it's my fault. Big bosses like Ancient Dragon or Sin wear down your weapons, and those fights are as much resource management as they are combat checks. Ancient Dragon is easy, people. Weapon durability is Dark Souls 2 at its best in microcosm. A big nerf to absolutely everything in the player's arsenal, but one that can meaningfully, yet not inconveniently, alter the player's engagement with the game. In the other games, durability is paperwork. Here it's meaningful content. Number 5, Frozen Outskirts, Dark Souls 2, Crown of the Ivory King. Frozen Ilium Lois is the best area in Dark Souls 2, and probably the best area in Soulsborne. The albatross that drags it is the Frozen Outskirts, the consensus pick for the worst area in any FromSoftware game, but I'm here today to boldly yell that not only does Frigid Outskirts not suck, but to boldly flee to the Outskirts because it's actually good. The DS2 DLC co-op areas get Souls fans a bit touchy because of how overstuffed they are with enemies. Cave of the Dead is a non-stop catastrophe ending with the Gank Squad, a surprisingly fun co-op fight, perhaps deserving its own spot in this video, and Iron Passage is a Benny Hill nightmare. Only Frigid Outskirts, lovingly christened as either Horsefuck Valley or Reindeer Fuck Land, contains a complete novel idea. To navigate the endless blizzard that encases Ilium Lois, you must dash from cover to cover, from dilapidated duplex to falling castle, into and out of the storm and its many hidden Santa Clausian treasures. If you have the opportunity to, hop onto a voice chat with 1 to 3 friends and fight your way through the Frozen Outskirts. The 3 NPC summons are fun, but to do it with at least one other human is a treat. You will take casualties as greed inevitably consumes the soul of man, and the catharsis of surviving such a doomed expedition together is unlike anything else in the series. Reindeer Fuckland represents a dead end in the series, as co-op areas aren't something that FromSoftware has pursued, and that makes this area worth playing as long as the DS2 servers are still with us. The only unforgivable act is the boss encounter with Lud and Zalin, the king's pets, but Reindeer Fuckland needed something to keep it from peak status. Number 6, The Nightmare of Menis, Bloodborne. Late games in Souls can sometimes become a little overtuned. Regular mobs in Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring get so powerful and fast and vicious as to become borderline unmanageable in fights. The stairway leading down to the swamp in the ringed city is especially heinous, as enemies that move and tank like early to mid-game bosses swarm the player in groups of 2, 3, 4, or more. But you'll learn to love it. You'll learn how to loot levels around it, but no level has weaponized this nasty tendency in the Miyazaki games quite as well as the Nightmare of Menis. There are 4 different flavors of unmanageable in this level, all paced out and delivered with surgical speed. The player is shot with frenzy from the giant brain, bombarded by boulders, opens a door to a giant spider nest, flees into a hallway patrolled by an NPC hunter brandishing Ludwig's holy blade, and then, after a well-deserved break, gets hit by winter lanterns. It's a level of aggressive enemies, stage hazards, and peppered with frenzy, the most vile status effect in Bloodborne. The rewards for this level are a blood rock, a reward for jumping out of a busted elevator basket and surviving more winter lanterns, and Mikolash, host of the nightmare. After somehow surviving the gauntlet Nightmare of Menis racks upon the player, you are greeted by the only boss in the series that turns around and runs away. That he can one-shot many players with a call beyond is a brutal denouement to not just the level, but the entire game, with Mikolash being the penultimate required boss. FromSoft takes glee in fucking with players, and this is where, on a level-wide scale, that sick glee is at its most calculated. Before digging through the rest of our nuclear stocking, I want to take a minute and thank this channel's supporters on Patreon and YouTube. The names you see on screen make these videos possible. If you would like to support for as little as $1 a month or $10 a year, follow the link in the description below. Supporters get early access to scripts, exclusive essays, videos, as well as membership to a Discord game club. In the month of January, we will be playing Parasite Eve together, and I would love to see you there. Now back to the list, with the Living Failures, Bloodborne the Old Hunters, the Goon Squad at the top of the research hall, knuckle-dragging around the Lumenwood Garden, guarding the entrance to the beloved corpse of my beloved Lady Marie of the Astral Clock Tower, are one of the highlights of FromSoftware gank bosses. Gank fights are controversial because they are often comically easy, forgettable, or nightmares. But they remain tantalizing because Ornstein and Smo and Shadows of Yharnam are some of From's finest. Living Failures are a forgotten gem because of their visual proximity to Celestial Emissary and their physical proximity to Ludwig the Holy Blade and Lady Maria. Despite being the least memorable of the 5 Old Hunters bosses, Living Failures are a triumvirate of FromSoft's aesthetic sensibilities. The Lumenwood Gardens are achingly beautiful and horrific, a place of peace and collapsing stars. The Living Failures are a tragic group, forgotten by players and the lore because they are merely the greatest of failed experiments on nobodies. And, like the nobodies depicted in Greek theater, they must star in the comedy. Their name, Living Failures, makes them an eternal laughingstock, a lankish militia of goobers keeping the gate to their waifu in mind. By embodying FromSoftware's tragedy, comedy, horror, the Living Failures come to embody Bloodborne in more totality than some of the iconic fights like Father Gascoigne, by being a broad-faced, subtle thesis statement about the game's thematic and narrative preoccupations. FromSoft excels at doing this with random, forgettable bosses. Like Pinwheel, the Living Failures haunt their game as a forgotten ghost. Ancient Wyvern, Dark Souls 3. The boss health bar is the betrayer of Ancient Wyvern, as it is for many Souls bosses. For the base game, it is a shame that the one dragon fight is a set piece and that it would require the Ringed City for DS3 to get a great dragon fight with Midir, but a lot of the discussion around Ancient Wyvern pretends that the first, raw, naked fight against it doesn't exist. In the same way people memory hole the King of the Storm phase of Nameless King, the worst boss phase in the game, people forget the controller catastrophe that happens on a first playthrough against Ancient Wyvern. Unless you fully spoil yourself on what the gimmick to Ancient Wyvern is, it's going to be a cycle of failed attempts. Smushed by the Wyvern, cooked by the Wyvern, sliced by the Axe and Chain guy, ganked by the Man-Serpents. One of the oldest, most persistent criticism against the Soulsborne series is that running past everything is often the easiest way to win, and players often learn this tech through rewarded impatience when making their X, Y, and Z attempts at a boss. On top of its cool proto-Mist Noble, proto-John Sekiroian finale, the Ancient Wyvern fight transforms the boss run back into the central challenge of the boss fight, by placing both runback and boss in the same arena. It's like a hardcore version of Adjudicator if Adjudicator was cool. Unless you spoil yourself on it, which most people do, let's be real, it's one of the most unique boss fights in the series, combining the runback with spectacle. Easy, trivial, non-issue when you have the knowledge. But the journey to acquire the knowledge, that's a treat. Number 9, Painted World of Arendelle, Dark Souls 3, Ashes of Arendelle. Ashes of Arendelle is a case of a DLC being overjudged by its boss roster. At one area and 2 bosses, it's numerically the slightest FromSoft DLC. Sister Frida is a highlight boss fight for the series. Champion's Gravetender resonates as a collective who, what, huh? But the sprawling level of the Painted World of Arendelle is delightful. Held back in esteem by not quite rising up to the level of the Painted World of Ariamis or Frozen Ilium Lois, Arendelle finds excellence within the house of Dark Souls 3. Most of DS3 is a William Blake apocalyptic vision with the world ending as an event horizon, a smashing together of all atoms into formless ash, but Arendelle is closer to Robert Frost, a cold, biting level. Dead in an earthly way, Arendelle, played in winter, with snow blowing off the window and a chill creeping through, plays like no other Souls level. It's a lonesome, classic FromSoft level, structured like an upside-down Boletarian palace, the player running to the chapel and then descending down to the frozen lake, up and around the abandoned town, and back up to the chapel to open the door to Sister Frida. I adore snow. The chilliness, the grey wolves, the tortured, twisted trees. Nothing else in DS3 has a comparable vibe. The Ringed City doubles down on the game's aesthetic thesis, while Arendelle varies it, taking DS3's remix of Anor Londo and extending it to its frosted extreme. Too often, I see Souls-likes that stick unwaveringly close to the dark fantasy aesthetic, and FromSoft's willingness to vary and change color palettes and craft subtle differences in atmosphere and moods is what allows their games to glue themselves into your brain. Number 10, Gank Apes, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro isn't a Souls game, but it's as funny as any Souls game. The truly indispensable part of FromSoftware's design is the sense of humor that brackets every step of these Nightmare games. No apocalyptic vision or oppressive atmosphere is complete without a joke, and this mischievous DNA is all over Sekiro. The combat in Sekiro is the most sensually satisfying of any FromSoft game. The metallic clanging of swords and the rhythmic pulsing of the combat is at its best during the highlight one-on-one human boss fights, but Sekiro paces these fights to be rare indulgences, despite having a combat system that could sustain an overload of them. FromSoft instead builds many different types of aesthetic pleasures into the boss roster. Spectacle fights and puzzle fights, and also the comic relief fight. If all 4 phases of Guardian Ape are considered one fight, this 4-course meal is one of the funniest acts of violence FromSoft has ever committed to, complete with appetizer, entree, dessert, and arsenic. The fake-out death screen to the headless second phase, to a dramatically ironic interlude, to a headless rematch, and then the double ape gank is a delirious flow of emotion. Each win gives way to a banana peel of increasingly vulgar size. The final fight against the headless ape and his unfortunate bride is a total mess. A seeming victory lap against a once powerful foe becomes a mad dash to set off firecrackers against their overlapping attacks. Sure, it might be the worst combat in the game, but mechanical satisfaction isn't the only emotion games can inspire. It's so rare for a game like Sekiro to have such superlative, interactive slapstick that we have no choice but to stand in awe. Number 11, Rainbow Stones, Elden Ring. Consider this an ode to random consumable items no one uses. I give this to Elden Ring because of its crafting system, a secondary ode of this section, and I call it Rainbow Stones at the request of Nin, this video's editor, who's a freak for rainbow stones. Throughout the series, and really in every video game where people commit the senseless self-violence of hoarding, so much utility is buried in the items menu. Rainbow stones are famous for being an easy way to check fall damage, or less famously, for lighting up the Stormveil Castle key trap room. So much Soulsborne discussion is about bosses, a little less often about levels, and consumable items are almost always left unaccounted. With the structure of the pre-Elden Ring games, items do present a major problem of not resetting after death, creating a situation where you might as well learn how to beat Lady Butterfly without the snap seeds, But bosses aren't all there is to these games. Using Lloyd's talismans on mimics, throwing fistfuls of ash into mobs of mobs, or using poison knives on the infinite ammo hunters are all ways to augment the game's difficulties that are often left unused by a sick sense of gamer pride. Even if it's just to help your non-gamer uncle navigate the confusing world of this daggone Nintendo game, the items are worth using, especially in Elden Ring. Try the crystal darts. I know you'll love them. Number 12. Golden Hippopotamus, Elden Ring Shadows of the Erdtree. The Golden Hippo sucks, but it's probably my fault for expecting anything. Shadows of the Erdtree is not only a Mikola Easter egg hunt, but a quest to Mesmer the Impaler. You walk in the path of his destruction, fighting his soldiers, fighting his loyal knights, fighting his tragic Ophelia who could not replace the mother that haunts him. The air leading up to the Shadow Keep is different. It's still. The fog lingers. The spires rise and fade into the crumbling sky. You walk up and take a long, slow elevator ride to the top, expecting Mesmer, expecting the tragic figure who has destroyed the lands of Shadow to greet you. Instead, you get a giant hippo. Yes, it's yet another entry on this list about how FromSoft is great at playing with the player, at being the real gamer who trolls all the unfortunate souls bound to these games with beautifully crafted jokes. But unlike Gank Apes, this is more than a joke. The structures around Golden Hippopotamus, the worst fight in Shadows of the Erdtree, reveal that no amount of stupid can keep these games from excelling. Even a joke at the precipice of the journey thus far cannot be removed from the melancholy that surrounds it, and its existence as a boss that delays the gratification of Mesmer only makes Mesmer a greater impact. The Golden Hippo makes Mesmer Elden Ring's hairy lime, an entity as powerful in absence as in presence. Take the Golden Hippo out if you want, but its existence is gripped into Elden Ring's world. A bull-rush monstrosity guarding the man in the high tower, like the burning bull before Genichiro, paces the march to the top and brands the question, can it get worse, into the player's brain. It's a joke of perfect emulsion. I hope you had fun running through some of my favorite parts of the Soulsborne series, and please, share below in the comments some of your favorite underrated bits from the series, and if you want more, prepare yourself, because there is more. The real Christmas present is the massive, mega killer Soulsborne retrospective series coming next year, and I will see you all in the first part with Demon Souls.